cleanse my guilt and pride. Blood of Christ the crucified. From your hands, your feet, your side. Jesus, I trust in you.
Are you ready for persecution? You know, when times are good, churches can fill up, But it's when times are bad that you really find out who the Christians are. When Christianity is persecuted, that's when you find out who the true Christians are. When it's acceptable, you don't know. There's lots of tares mixed in among the wheat. But when the persecution comes, it separates the tares from the wheat. In every case, it separates. And like Judas, the persecution came, he was tempted, he wasn't really walking with the Lord anyway, he was a thief and he was a liar and so on and so forth, and it separated him. And so it will be with Brent's revelation there. The Judases are going to be separated. They're going to be revealed. They're going to side with the harlot, and they're going to side against the saints. And Judas sided with the harlot of his day, apostate Judaism, against the saints. So it will be again. We're not far from persecution. We're not far, I believe, from that next attack on America, which is going to be used really to strike down the right wing in America and cause the country to turn very sharply left. And following that, I believe we'll see a civil war. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that civil war. But first, I want to share something with you. It's a little piece of a news article that we received recently, which I think is very, very prophetic and will help us see that history is about to repeat itself here and that we're not very far from the tribulation. In recent history, whenever the U.S. has cooperated to give away Israel's biblical land to their enemies, judgment has come upon the United States. Sometimes it was man-made and sometimes it was natural, but judgment came. And I think we're about to see this again, maybe even that 911 strike that we're talking about. This is the article. Some of you have already read it, I'm sure, but I want to make some comments about it and maybe look at some prophetic things here. U.S. to back unilateral declaration of Palestinian state. That's very interesting. Top official negotiating with Washington on threat to ask for recognition from the UN. And this is a WorldNet Daily article from Tel Aviv. It says the Palestinian Authority has been negotiating an understanding with the Obama administration regarding a Palestinian threat to unilaterally ask the United Nations to recognize a Palestinian state outside of negotiations with Israel. In other words, get the UN to take away their land and give it to the Palestinians. According to a senior PA official, the PA's chief negotiator, Saeb Erekat, headed a team that held a series of meetings the past few weeks with members of the Obama administration in Washington to discuss the U.S. response should the Palestinians bring to the UN Security Council a resolution to unilaterally create a Palestinian state. In other words, we're not even going to ask the Jews about this anymore. We're just going to go over their head and we're going to create this Palestinian state. The U.S. position, he says, Erekat says, the U.S. position is less restrained than it appears in the media. I am absolutely sure he's right on this because they're wanting the world to see one picture of their opinion. I'm talking about the Obama administration. But the facts behind the scene are totally different. And he said the U.S. position is less restrained than it appears in the media, said the PA official, referring to media claims that the U.S. would veto any such resolution. Well, that's what they're wanting people to think, especially conservatives and Christians and right-wing people, because they'd be up in arms if they thought that Obama's going to do what he's going to try to do. So they're trying to play it all down. They're trying to sneak it through, like they do things through Congress, but without people actually reading the paper or, actually finding out what's going on. We'll just sneak it on through, then it'll be too late, right? Total dishonesty and lack of integrity. The PA official told WND the Obama administration did not threaten to veto the conceptual unilateral resolution, which had been threatened by the Palestinians last month. The official also said the U.S. supports the creation of a Palestinian state in the 1967 borders, meaning the Gaza Strip, West Bank, and east sections of Jerusalem. Well, I believe that's what they're sneaking up on right there. I mean, they're trying to sneak this thing through. They've already made steps to bring this to pass. They've been negotiating with Hamas, and they've been negotiating, I'm talking about the Obama administration, with the Palestinians in order to bring this thing to pass. And I got news for you, folks. If you did give them this land for peace, if you gave them, well, they already took the Gaza Strip, but the West Bank and eastern Jerusalem, they wouldn't be satisfied with the pre-67 borders. They wouldn't be satisfied with half of Europe. They wouldn't be satisfied with half of the United States. They wouldn't be satisfied with half of the world. Their plan is to conquer the whole world. And they say so openly. And of course, if they got their wish, the whole world would be a slum. But at any rate, this is what they're trying to sneak through, and it doesn't surprise us considering that we're coming so close to the tribulation period, right? The report follows a WND interview last month with Ahmed Correa, former PA Prime Minister and member of the Palestinian Liberation Organization Executive Committee, who said the PA reached an understanding with important elements within the Obama administration to possibly bring to the resolution to the UN Security Council. Asked to which elements he was referring, Correa would only say they were from the Obama administration. Of course, they're trying to sneak this through, right? They don't want people to be up in arms and to resist them, so they want to sneak it through. A top PA negotiator speaking on condition of anonymity named the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Susan Rice, and National Security Council member Samantha Powers as among the Obama administration officials who were involved with the Palestinians' UN threat. So they're working behind the scenes to bring this to pass. And actually, I'm going to tell you, they've been working behind the scenes to bring this to pass for a long time. I'm going to share that with you in just a minute. The U.S. told us that they preferred a negotiated settlement with Israel, but if we Palestinians insist on a resolution, the Americans will not necessarily reject it, the PA negotiator said. The U.S. has a history of never before vetoing any UN move to create a new state, the negotiator pointed out. And this section here says the U.S. supporting Palestinian land grab. While the Obama administration has long called for a halt to Jewish construction in eastern Jerusalem, and of course they found a friend in Netanyahu who gave them their wish, although his politicking before he became leader was totally the opposite. It goes on to say, it is totally supporting the building of official Palestinian institutions in those same areas as well as the strategic West Bank, a top Palestinian authority recently told WND. The official, speaking on condition of anonymity, confirmed a recent report by Israel's Shabak Security Services that the PA has been opening official institutions in what are termed Areas B and C. According to 1993 Oslo Accords, territories defined as Area A are entirely administered and controlled by the Palestinians. Area B is administered by the PA but normally controlled by Israel. Whereas Area C, including eastern Jerusalem, is supposed to be entirely administered and controlled by Israel. So they said basically they would be controlling B and C, and they're doing that, more so, taking over more and more. In defiance of the accords, the Palestinians in recent months have opened up official institutions, including PA ministry offices in Area C. And I want to tell you something else. Back in 2007, I saw the pictures of a wall that was built between eastern and western Jerusalem, and at the time it seemed like the wall was almost finished at the time. Now they advertised this wall to keep suicide bombers out of the Israeli side, but this was a permanent, solid, well-built wall being laid down, and I suspect it was being laid down in preparation for the dividing of Jerusalem, not just to keep the suicide bombers out of the west side of Jerusalem. And I think we'll see that this is going to come to pass. That was in 2007. I'm sure it was almost finished then. I'm sure it's probably finished now. A WND investigation previously determined the U.S. has been aiding the Palestinians in developing infrastructure in eastern Jerusalem, including property legally owned by Jews. So what are they going to do with these Jews when they decide, okay, the east side is yours, take it over? You got Gaza, you can have the West Bank, you can have East Jerusalem, and America is now cooperating with them and even helping them to bring it to pass right now. And like I said, every time America's done such a thing, the people have had to pay for it. Every time an administration, the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, and now the Obama administration, every time they have done such a thing, the people have ended up paying for it in some kinds of catastrophes, natural or man-made. So I think we're headed towards another one here. A tour of the Jerusalem neighborhoods found some surprising developments. Official PA logos and placards are bound, including one glaring red street sign at the entrance to the neighborhoods warning Israelis to keep out of their own city, the East Jerusalem. Another official sign in Kfar Akeb in Jerusalem reads in English, Ramallah Jerusalem Road. This project is a gift from the American people to the Palestinian people in cooperation with the Palestinian Authority. And the sign bears the emblems of the American and PA governments and the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. The displays were not present during a previous WND tour of the neighborhoods in 2006. So basically, the Palestinians are taking over eastern Jerusalem with the help of America. Some local schools in the Jerusalem neighborhoods are officially run by the PA, some in conjunction with the UN, and many teachers drawing PA salaries. Civil disputes are usually settled not in Israeli courts, but in the PA judicial system, although at times Israeli courts are used, depending upon the matter. Councils governed by PA President Mahmoud Abbas, Fatah organization, oversee some municipal matters. USAID provides the PA funds for road and infrastructure projects. So how come people like Netanyahu, who was at least politicking on the grounds that he would never let this happen, how come he's letting this happen and he's being very quiet about it? I think we'll find the answer in the scriptures in just a few minutes. Israeli security officials said the local Jerusalem police rarely operate in peripheral eastern Jerusalem Arab neighborhoods. Instead, security has been turned over to the Israeli Defense Forces and Border Police, who work almost daily with PA security forces. The PA police operate in the Jerusalem neighborhoods in coordination with Israel. Shmulik Ben Ruby, spokesman for the Jerusalem police, confirmed the arrangement. If there are fights between some local families, sometimes we involve the PA police to make peace between the families, he told WND. Yes, the PA police can operate in these neighborhoods in coordination with the IDF and border police. Dmitry Ziliani, a spokesman for the Jerusalem section of Fatah, confirmed to WND the Palestinians have set up local command in some neighborhoods of Jerusalem. Quote, we were covering the best ways to improve our performance on the street and how we can be of service to the community. Ziliani said the PA holds regular official meetings in Jerusalem in anticipation of a future Palestinian state encompassing all of East Jerusalem. Our political program, as Fatah dictates, there will be no Palestinian state if these areas, all of East Jerusalem, are not included. And of course they wouldn't be satisfied with that. According to Israeli law, the PA cannot officially meet in Jerusalem. The PA previously maintained a de facto headquarters in Jerusalem called Orient House, but the building was closed by Israel in 2001 following a series of suicide bombings in Jerusalem. Israel said it had information indicating the house was used to plan and fund the terrorism. Thousands of documents, copies of bank certificates, and checks captured by Israel from Orient House, including many documents obtained by WND, showed the offices were used to finance terrorism, including direct payments to the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigade's terror group. You know, let me share something with you that I think the Scriptures is telling us concerning this and maybe where it's going. You remember, of course, that the Assyrian Empire gave way to the Babylonian Empire for 70 years. And then they were conquered by the Medo-Persians. And in Jeremiah chapter 25, let me read this to you. We are coming to that 70 years. Jeremiah 25, verse 9 says, behold, I will send and take all of the families of the north, says the Lord, and I will send unto Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land, and against the inhabitants thereof, and against all these nations round about, and I will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment and a hissing, and a perpetual desolation. Moreover, I will take from them the voice of mirth, and the voice of gladness, and the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones, and the light of the lamp. And this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And I've shared with you what the Lord told me, that this was actually going to be 7 years. And verse 12 says, and it shall come to pass that when 70 years are accomplished, that I will punish the king of Babylon. And of course that happened when the Medes and the Persians, the bear, conquered Babylon. The lion with the eagle's wings, which you know represents the British Empire and America, and of course each of these empires was the head of the world in their time, and each of them represents the end time head of the world, because the 7 heads are Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, and so on. See, so each one of those is a type and a shadow of what's going to happen in the end time. And we see here that the Lord is going to bring Babylon against these Middle Eastern countries, beginning, of course, with Israel. Because we're told in verse 17, then I took the cup at the Lord's hand and made all the nations to drink unto whom God had sent me, to wit, Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, and the kings thereof, and the princes thereof, to make them a desolation and astonishment, a hissing and a curse, as it is this day. And we're told in verse 29, he said, For lo, I begin to work evil at the city which is called by my name. What do you think would happen in the tribulation period? He tells you at the beginning of the 70 years here, historically, that he began to work evil at the city which is called by his name. And he said, And should you be utterly unpunished? He's speaking to Babylon there. Which of course in one way is America at the head of world Babylon, right? The head of a one world order, right? So we see here that God is going to bring not peace and security to Israel, but destruction. First of all, what happened to them when they gave land for peace in Gaza? Well, the Palestinians just moved into Gaza and set up their missiles and started shooting them into Israel. They just had a closer place to shoot from, that's all. What's going to happen when you get East Jerusalem? Well, I don't think it's going to be any better. They're not going to be satisfied with East Jerusalem. They want all of Jerusalem, and they want to push Israel into the sea. That's their official dogma, to push Israel into the sea, right? All of this also represents, folks, what's happening in Christendom, because Israel is a type and a shadow of what happens to the church. So once again, the church is headed for judgment at the hands of Babylon, just exactly like Israel is. You know what? We started out, the further back in the Old Testament you go, Israel was a sign and a symbol of what was going to happen to the church way down the road, right? Then the closer we got to the New Covenant, where Israel was grafted in, the more these signs begin to converge. First of all, Israel was a sign way ahead of the church manifesting that sign. The closer we get to the end, the more Israel is going to pull right up alongside of the church, who is also going to be in the same fix. We're about to see Israel and the church together persecuted by the beast. We're about to see these signs pulling right alongside of one another the closer we get to the end, you see. And I think this is the way we can see this manifested. Well, they want to unite Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and under a Palestinian state, permitting the Palestinians to more freely and easily be right on the border with Israel and persecuting Israel. And I think the Scriptures is showing us some things about this. When they gave Gaza for what they thought was peace, which was ridiculous, anybody with common sense knew that they weren't going to get any peace by giving them Gaza. They were going to give them a place to shoot at them from, So, but they displaced all the Jews that were in Gaza. And some of those people still don't have a place to lay their head. They displaced those Jews. What's going to happen when they displace the Jews of East Jerusalem? Because there's still a lot of Jews in East Jerusalem. What are they going to do? They're going to have to displace them because the wall's going to be there and they're going to be utterly unsafe and they're going to be utterly attacked by these people. So they're going to have to displace them. And the Bible talks about this displacement a few times, and I think it's a type and a shadow of where we're going and what's going to happen. Part of that, I guess, would be in Ezekiel 17. We've looked at this parable before, but I haven't really talked much about this displacement, but it seems to be certainly there. And maybe even the type and a shadow of what's about to happen is there. You remember the story in Ezekiel 17, how that the great eagle with great wings, which was Babylon, came and conquered Israel. When Babylon became the one world order of its day, Israel was the first to suffer, as we just read in Jeremiah 25 was the first to suffer. And what happened? Well, they came and took their king. Let me read that to you. Let's start in verse 11 here, Ezekiel 17:11. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Say ye now to the rebellious house. This is the reason all this is happening, folks. It's because of the love of God for His elect people that are in the midst of Israel and in the midst of the church. Because remember, this parable fits Israel as well as it fits the church, right? But He's dealing with the rebellious house. He is trying to humble an elect group of people that are in the midst there. Right? Know ye not what these things mean? Tell them, Behold, the king of Babylon came to Jerusalem, and took the king thereof, and the princes thereof, and brought them to him to Babylon. Well, let me make a suggestion here. I'm not really solidly convinced of this, but it's a possibility. This part right here happens before the tribulation period. The reason I say that is they took the king of Babylon and his princes captive, and then they set up a puppet government, which King Zedekiah led, and they set them up and started a covenant. And this covenant that they started in verse 13 on down is the one I shared with you. The Lord showed me many years ago when I was reading this, and the Lord started asking me questions. And I started looking at the text, and He showed me that from verse 13 on down, there is 7 verses which represent the 7-year covenant, in which the word covenant is mentioned 6 times, which is the covenant of the beast, right? And He makes this with this puppet government over Israel, which of course is also talking about the puppet government over the church. You remember we studied recently about how that the CIA and Reverend Moon and several other people are working together to bring all of the leading ministries of Christendom under the government. And they've done a great job of that. There's some very interesting revelations on the site about this. So, anyway, verse 13 begins this covenant, but verse 12 is talking about something that happens before the covenant, taking their king and their leadership into bondage. Well, I don't know if this is something that came to me, believe it or not, when Olmert, you remember the previous guy, Netanyahu's predecessor, Olmert, was caught taking a gift. It just happened to be from an American businessman who later came back and fingered Olmert for receiving illegal funds from America. It was like they set him up. I thought to myself at the time, did they just set him up to get him out of there? And sure enough, this guy came back and fingered Olmert as the guy who took these funds. Well, he gave them to him. You know, it looked like a setup to me, and I didn't know for sure, but that thought passed through my mind. Well, suddenly Olmert is history. He's out of there. You know, and he's still going through troubles, all because of this American that set him up and so on and so forth. Well, he's out of there, and his princes that supported him are out of there too. It's interesting. Well, that happened, of course, just before what we think is coming, which is the tribulation covenant. Well, who's the guy that's in there now? Netanyahu is in there now. Everything he promised when he was politicking for that position, he's gone back on. Everything. And people are wondering, now, what happened here? Why is this guy going back on everything that he promised? Well, I think that's where our story starts here in verse 13 on down. And it says, And he took of the seed royal, obviously Netanyahu had that position once before, and made a covenant with him. He also brought him under an oath, and took away the mighty of the land, that the kingdom might be base, that it might not lift itself up, but that by keeping his covenant, it might stand. Well, again, I suggest that it is a possibility that Netanyahu is Zedekiah here. And again, as you go on down 3.5 verses, which would be 3.5 years into this covenant, this puppet king breaks the covenant. He rebels against the king of Babylon. Listen, that's in the middle of the tribulation period, and the Jewish leadership breaks the covenant, rebels against the king of Babylon, the great eagle. You know what? That's going to happen in America too. We already know that. We're seeing 2 rebellions here against the great eagle. We're seeing the Jews and the Christians in the right wing rebelling against the great eagle. That's kind of interesting. Why would they rebel at that particular time? Because that's when the mark of the beast comes. For the Christian side, I can tell you, the Christians already know what the mark of the beast is. They're doing this to force the Christians out. Otherwise, they would be very covert in any kind of thing that they made. No, they're making it very boldly. You know, the mark that they all think is the mark, and it's coming, and they're going to, and so they're forcing the Christians out. They're forcing them to rebel, to fight, so on and so forth. They're forcing them out. Well, I even got to looking at the dates on this thing, The first Jehoiakim was the king that, in verse 12, was taken out. He had just received the kingdom from his father. And Jehoiakim was taken out in something like 597 BC. That would have been before the 7-year covenant. And but then they put in Zedekiah, who was the puppet leadership. And actually Zedekiah, according to some reading that I had already planned to rebel against the king of Babylon. I'm talking about literally in history. Zedekiah made a plan to rebel against the king of Babylon in something like 593, I think, BC. He made this plan and actually went out to the other governments surrounding him to get their support to do this thing, you see. Don't know if you noticed this or not, but Netanyahu, as Obama began to press him and his government, he went out and sided with Egypt and Saudi Arabia against the United States. They were making their own confederacy. And that's been going on for several months now. So I thought, hey, that seems to be a parallel too. That's interesting. So, well, halfway through this, Zedekiah rebels. Possibly the same thing will happen with Netanyahu. We'll find out, soon enough. But that happened in the middle of the 7 verses or the 7-year tribulation, and that happened in 586 BC. That actually happened. Well, another interesting thing is that that was a dispersion right there. There was 3 dispersions of the Jews. One of them was Jehoiakim. One of them was Zedekiah when he rebelled, and he tried to escape through a hole in the wall, and the king of Babylon's soldiers caught him and caught his people, and they blinded him, and they sent him to Babylon. Okay? And then, of course, there was the second 3.5 years that came in after 586 BC. It was actually 586 BC when that happened. When he split, he got caught, and so on and so forth. And then you would think, now let's see, when is the next dispersion? Well, we know from the Bible the next dispersion is the one where all nations is gathered against Jerusalem, and half the city is taken, right? The next dispersion. Well, guess what? Guess when the next dispersion happened? It happened, let's see, 4 years later, which would be 3.5 years, or a little over 4 years later. 3.5 years plus a day of the Lord, and so on and so forth. So You got another dispersion there. And guess what? A dispersion actually happened there in 582. 582. Which in our timing would be the day of the Lord. That's interesting. Again, this thing is following, it looks like, right on track here, you know. So if this is all true, you know, I don't know how closely. I know that God, He uses signs in history and He repeats them. And how explicit, you just have to keep looking to see how much is He going to repeat. In other words, how exact is this going to be? You just have to keep looking. So I do. I just keep looking for parallels to see how exact this thing is going to be. Okay? Well, I think it's pretty interesting so far. And I'd like to point out something to you in Amos. Okay? Because it speaks about a dispersion here in Amos. And I'm going to start reading in Amos chapter 9 and verse 7. I hope you're following me so far. Are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel, says the Lord? Have not I brought up Israel out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Syrians from Kir? Behold, the eyes of the Lord are upon the sinful kingdom, and I will destroy it from off the face of the earth. Save that I will not utterly destroy the house of Jacob, says the Lord. Well, I think a lot of people don't know the destruction that's coming to Israel. I think a lot of conservative Christians don't have the foggiest idea what's about to happen to natural Israel. Nor do they have the foggiest idea what's going to happen to them, because that is also a sign of what's going to happen to them. There is a tribulation coming. They think they're going to fly away. They think Israel is, and most of them think America is going to side with Israel, and Israel will be preserved all the way up until the day of the Lord. Well, no, that isn't going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is God has an elect that's quite content to live in the midst of Israel, and they don't know yet that through tribulation they're going to get saved and come into the kingdom. And if they didn't have that tribulation, they wouldn't get saved and come into the kingdom. So God's got a good plan for what right now is a bad people, because He's going to bring an elect out of them just like He's going to bring an elect out of the church. But it's going to be through tribulation. If this tribulation and trouble didn't come, they wouldn't cry out to God. And that's why it's coming. Okay? So Israel as we know it is going to be destroyed, persecuted, attacked. And verse 9, For lo, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel among the nations. Well, what about these dispersions that are yet to come? You know, are they coming? Sure, I believe that they are. You know, they're gathering, there are religious groups out there gathering Jews from all over the world and bringing them to Israel. For what? Great tribulation, that's what they're bringing them there for. And some of them are not going to stick around. They're going to be dispersed. It wasn't, you know, we think of the dispersion as a large portion of Israel, but it really wasn't that way. Let me share something with you here. They said something like 120,000 people were in Israel at the time of the dispersion. But let me share this with you. As regards the number of Jews deported by Nebuchadnezzar, there are two divergent reports. According to the statements in Jeremiah 52, 28 through 30, it tells you exactly how many were deported right there, which must be accepted as the more reliable, as they certainly are more complete. 3,023 Jews were deported in 597 BC, 832 inhabitants in 586, 745 in 582. And let's see, but in biblical times, as today, in Oriental countries, only the men were counted. Hence it follows that 14,000 to 18,000 souls must have been deported to Babylon. So that's not as big as some people think about this deportation here. And it's actually ends up being about an eighth according to Jeremiah 52:28 through 30, that were led captive into Babylonia. So, and the rest of them were still there. And as we know, they were still there at the end of the tribulation period in the great and terrible day of the Lord, when all nations, come against Israel, right? So we're not talking about a monstrous percentage of the people there, okay? Let me read the rest of this. For lo, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel among the nations, like as a grain is sifted in a sieve. Yet shall not the least kernel fall upon the ground. Because obviously when you sift wheat, you want to, get rid of the chaff, right? You want to keep the wheat, the kernel, the fruit, right? And that's, of course, why God's doing this, is He wants to get some fruit out of this. This great tribulation is going to bring some fruit out of this, from not only the natural Jews, but the spiritual Jews. He's going to get some fruit out of this. He said they're not going to fall to the ground, right? He's going to save them, right? But listen to this now. And all the sinners of my people shall die by the sword, who say the evil shall not overtake nor meet us. Hey, that's just what Christianity's been saying. We're not going through any of that. We'll never see the beast, so on and so forth. But they're wrong. And as long as they hold to that, they're not getting prepared to be holy before the Lord. They just want to escape, as filthy and dirty as they are, and it's not going to happen. So, God says the same thing about natural Israel here. About those that don't end up being the elect. All the sinners of my people shall die by the sword, who say the evil shall not overtake us. So He's going to sift Israel among the nations. But now look, watch this, verse 11. In that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up its ruin, and I will build it as in the days of old. Well, now wait a minute. What tabernacle of David did he raise up when this physically happened? These deportations of Israelites, when that physically happened? There wasn't any. When did this raising up of the tabernacle of David happen? Well, let me show you. Way back over here in Acts chapter 15, when Jesus came on the scene. He was the raising up of the tabernacle of David. He was David. But that wasn't the last time this is going to happen. Okay, this is the when it happened when Jesus started the new covenant. It says in verse 13, Acts 15:13, and after they had held their peace, James answered, saying, Brethren, hearken unto me. Simeon hath rehearsed how first God visited the Gentiles to take out of them a people for His name. When did that happen? Well, it happened in these days right here, right? And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written, After these things I will return, and I will build again the tabernacle of David. Here's the fulfillment of it. The Gentile church coming forth, okay? I will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen. And I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up, that the residue of men, or the remnant of men, may seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called. Okay. Wow. So here, He's applying this sifting of Israel among the nations, and He says, in that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen. Now, this revelation here happens twice. First, it happens in Jesus' day, because He was David. Okay? And as you know, Paul said, you have come to this heavenly Jerusalem in Hebrews chapter 12, but after that there was a great falling away to Babylon, wasn't they? They fell into captivity. See? And now what's happening is they're coming back And God is once again going to raise up the tabernacle of David. Once again, this time with the man-child. It's still going to be the Lord. There is going to be a renewal of the kingdom. It's still going to be the Lord. It's still going to be David. But it's going to be David and his man-child raising this up again so that the remnant of men can seek after the Lord. And let me read to you what it says in Hebrews chapter 8, 1 and 2. It says, "Now in the things which we are saying, the chief point is this: we have such a high priest who sat down on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord pitched and not man." So we're talking about a spiritual tabernacle here, right? Which the Lord pitched. And who was it? It was the tabernacle of David we just read about right there. Tabernacle is a temporary temple. It's a mobile temple. And since God's people are going to be traveling through their wilderness, they can't have a temple. They have to have a mobile temple. It has to be a tabernacle, and the tabernacle is them. It's them. And then again, if we look over in chapter 9 and verse 11 of Hebrews, it says, "But Christ, having come a high priest of the good things to come through the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands." Well, that's God's people, right? The tabernacle that was not made with hands. This is to say, not of this creation. In other words, not of the Jewish creation, not of the natural creation. This is a spiritual tabernacle for a spiritual people who are that tabernacle, right? And it goes on to say, "Nor yet through the blood of goats and calves, but through his own blood." Now that has to happen in the New Testament, and we already know it says it happens with the Gentiles. And when we go back over to Amos chapter 9, we see that he says, I'm going to read it again, verse 11, "In that day," in what day? "In the day when he sifts Israel among the nations." That don't sound like peace and security, Israel strong against their enemies, and so on and so forth. And of course, Ezekiel 17 don't sound like that either, does it? Okay. "In that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof." And of course, that has to happen in our day. There's too many holes through the wall in our day, right? God has to raise this up again. He's going to raise it up again through the man-child who is also prophesied to be David. "I will close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up its ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom." That's those people in red we were talking about. Right? Edomites, the red, the people who sold their birthright. "And all the nations that are called by my name." What does he mean, all the nations that are called by his name? All the nations aren't called by his name. Yes, but in all nations there is a group of people called his elect who are called by his name. You know, we just happen to be in this nation of America. There is a sect of Christianity, true Christianity in America. There is a people here that is called by his name, and every other nation too. And he's going to gather his people. Remember, the prophecies about Israel being gathered out of the nations. He's going to gather his people out of all nations to what? The heavenly Jerusalem. See, we're making full circle here now. We're coming back. You know, God's raising up his David. He's raising up his heavenly Jerusalem, capital city. And then they are like Esther, who saves the people of God from the beast. You see? So this is all happening again. Let me finish reading this. "And all the nations that are called by my name, says the Lord that doeth this. Behold, the days come, says the Lord, that the plowman shall overtake the reaper." Well, you know, if you got the plowman coming right up behind the reapers, and you're plowing everything you don't want back, in other words, you pick the fruit, and here comes the plow. Whoop, right on through there, you know. What does that sound like? Well, it sounds like that after the harvest, the day of the Lord comes. That's exactly what he's talking about. The plowman which is the day of the Lord, where He's going to plow it all back under, is coming up right behind the reaper, right after the harvest. Okay? And then He goes on to say, and the treader of grapes, what does that sound like? Revelation 14, the great day of the Lord, the vintage of the wrath of God, right, being picked. And the treader of grapes, him that soweth seed. So right behind the sower of seed is coming the treader of grapes. In other words, right behind the man-child's ministry and the two-witness ministry of the sowing of the seed and the raising up of the kingdom is going to come, what? The great and terrible day of the Lord. Right after the harvest. Great and terrible day of the Lord. And the mountains shall drop sweet wine, and all the hills shall melt. And I will bring back the captivity of my people Israel. Oh, praise God. And they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink the wine thereof. They shall also make gardens and eat the fruit of them. And I will plant them upon their land. And they, listen, you know they've never been planted upon their land. They've never taken more than a third of their land. The land that the Lord gave them back in Joshua, He delineated that land over there in Joshua. They never took more than a third of that land because they never set their foot on it and drove the enemies out. Okay? And so now He's going to tell them He's going to bring them back to their land. What are they doing right now? They're losing their land. They're losing their land. So when is this going to happen? Afterwards, watch. And I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more, listen, no more be plucked up out of their land. Well, are they being plucked up out of their land now? Yeah, they just lost Gaza a couple of years ago, and now they're about to lose East Jerusalem and so on and so forth, and they're about to lose this Palestinian state, right? Which I have given them. And they should, look, no more be plucked up from their land, which I have given them. Which I have given them. We'll go back to Joshua chapter 1. You find out the land that was given unto them. All the way over to the Euphrates, you know. I mean, we're talking about taking up a lot of the beast territory. You know, God's given it to them, you know. Well, this hadn't come to pass ever before. This has never come to pass before. You know why? He says, listen to what He says, they shall no more be plucked up from their land. Well, they just lost some land. So we know that has never happened. And they're about to lose some more. East Jerusalem. So that isn't it. So the fulfillment of this is after that. See? So I think most of Christendom doesn't believe what's about to happen with Israel, and they even less believe what's about to happen to the church because they're running parallel. They're fulfilling the same things. Both the Jews and the Christians are going to be running for their lives in the days to come. And we know, you know, from the revelation that we looked at earlier, that the Lord has a solution. It's His Passover, right? Esther is that solution too. You know, the Purim. A great story there. And I don't know that story will be fulfilled for all Christians. I'm sure that it won't be. But it'll be fulfilled for those who are wise and those who abide in Jesus Christ and those who believe the Word of God, and especially those who are the first fruits. You know, Esther was in the king's house, and she was going to escape that judgment. So I'm not sure all Christians will escape it. Matter of fact, I know they won't escape it. And, you know, to lose your life as a martyr is not bad. You still enter the kingdom. It's pretty good, I think. But to lose your spiritual life is very bad. Many will turn out to be persecutors and will persecute the people of God. And that's very bad, because they're like Esau, who is selling his birthright and going to lose the kingdom forever. The people dressed in red that persecute the people of God. Well, they're after the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza, and they want to make a Palestinian state, and they're going to do it they're going to try to sneak as much of it by as they can. They built that wall, been building that wall down the middle of that city for some years now. And I don't think they're deceiving very many people concerning what they're doing there. They have played politics with it and deceived an awful lot of people, and the national media is in it with them. The national media is hiding all of this. They want the conservatives and the Christians to be quiet and calm and peaceable until they find out too late that this thing has has come to pass, you know. And so, yeah, the king of Babylon is about to conquer. What did he say in Jeremiah 25? He begins first at the city which is called by my name. So we can see it happening now under our noses. You know, folks, it appears to me like it's very sure that the tribulation is to start very quickly. And this is part of it. Where will they put some of those refugees? I mean, Obama signed a document to take people that, you know, remember when Israel went into Gaza and, you know, and caused great destruction there and so on and so forth. And Obama signed a document to import a lot of those Palestinians into the United States, which is the craziest thing you've ever heard of unless you really understand that he's there to manage the destruction of America and that he's Muslim and not Christian. Who would bring those people into the middle of the United States? You know? Well, it's very possible they're going to import some Jews here, too, to make room for the Palestinians to take their land. I mean, we're seeing here a deportation of people from Israel to Babylon, the Great Eagle. It's very possible we'll see some of that. I do believe that the puppet government is in there now. And I do believe that that is the government that the covenant is going to be made with. As you know, I've never said that's most of Christendom believes that the Antichrist is going to make a covenant with Israel. And I've never believed that the covenant was going to be only some covenant by the Antichrist between Israel and the Arabs. I've never believed that was the scope of the covenant at all. I think they're going to make it with all religions, and they're going to try to do all this at one time, and the Christians included. You know, the parable in Ezekiel 17 is very plain. You know, the great eagle, there was a civil war involved because Zedekiah, when he rebelled against the great eagle with wings, he turned to another great eagle with great wings. And he was talking about a civil war there. The Lord is teaching us about a civil war there. There's only one great eagle with the great wings, and that is America. So we're talking about a civil war. But in the letter, Zedekiah turned to Egypt to defend him and his people against the great eagle. And of course, the great eagle conquered the great eagle of Egypt. They went in there and took Egypt out too. And that's what's going to happen to the conservatives who turn to the arm of the flesh. It's called going back to Egypt. When they turn to the arm of the flesh, the beast government here in America is going to conquer the Christians just like it's going to conquer those Jews. They're both going to rebel, and they're both going to find themselves in the same boat, running from the one world order with Babylon, America at the top of it. That's where we're headed. And at the same time, we're going to learn how to walk with the Lord in the wilderness. His preservation and His deliverance, is going to be ours. We have a Passover lamb. Everybody's going to have to run and get their Bibles and find out those promises real quick, This is going to drive people to read the Word, to study God, and to draw close to the Lord. This is going to cause people to do that in a hurry. Praise God. The people that count. I'm not talking about the apostates, but I am talking about the people that are the elect of God. These people that count.
What can quench my thirsting soul? Purest water, make me whole. Let your streams of mercy flow. Oh Jesus, I trust in you. Though the mountains fall into the sea, though the rivers rise, I still believe. For your mercy stands and your...
For information and materials and to contribute, go to ubm1.org. Contributions only may be addressed to UBM, P.O. Box 544, Madisonville, Tennessee, 37354.
The shining rays of red and white. Jesus, I trust in you. Oh, Sacred Heart, in you I find mercy seated for all.